All right, everyone. Today on the Second Chance podcast, we're joined by EksAyn Anderson. He goes by X Anderson, an influence strategist, international speaker, and best-selling author of The Key to the Gate. From overcoming the loss of his mother at a young age to breaking records in the business world, X's journey is a testament to the resilience and the power of influence. He's here to share how parents have more impact than they realize and how understanding influence can transform both our personal and professional lives. I'm excited. This topic, we're going to go down a lot of rabbit holes probably, but just right off the cuff is the parenting stuff I've read about you, Access. It brought me in. I immediately wanted to learn more about you and get to know you. So thank you, man. I really appreciate you taking time for me.
Thanks, Jeff, for having me on your show. What an honor it is to be on your show. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Um, And we'll jump right in and just let the conversation kind of evolve. But when we talk about second chances, yours began with just a profound loss, um, losing your mother at a young age. How did that loss shape your perspective on resilience, influence, and family? And how'd you turn that into strength?
Gosh, Jeff, that is such a good question. And it's not an easy answer. It wasn't something that happened overnight. I'll tell you that. When I was
Yeah.
young, I could tell you let me tell you just briefly. When I was young, I used to like to draw trees. I'd draw them the way I saw them. I'd draw them just kind of every branch, every leaf, every vein in the leaf. Later on, I went and saw how the other children drew trees and guess how they drew them? They drew them with two little lines and a poofy cloud on top. Well, um, I found out later that my mom, first of all, when I saw how the other children drew trees, I stopped drawing them the way I used to and started drawing them the way the other children drew them. And when I found out later that my mom, when she saw this, that she cried, she shed a tear, and you can imagine why. I mean, I kind of stopped being who I was, drawing these detailed trees, to just drawing the little simple cloud with the poofy cloud on top. And but fast forward a few years. I was at a Little League game, and there's a few different ways to play Little League. You can either be good, Jeff, and actually hit the ball. If you were pathetic like I was, you'd just hold the bat out, and the ball would hit the bat.
Sure.
Drop. It's called a bunt. I had one bunt the entire season, but I'm not here to tell you how bad it was at Little League. There was something that happened after this game. My mom complained of a very severe headache, and at one point she said that it was worse than childbirth. My dad became concerned. Eventually said, I'm going to take mom to the hospital. I remember Jeff standing there in the front room of our home as an 8-year-old boy, and I gave my mom a hug and I said, I love you. And then they drove away. Well, I was a little bit anxious at this point. Never seen my mom taken to the hospital like this. My uncle just happened to be visiting us at the time, and he was there. And I went to my uncle and I said, is my mom going to die? And he said, no, she's not going to die. She probably just has a migraine. And I said, do you promise my mom's not going to die? He goes, I promise. She's going to be fine. Just relax. She's going to be okay. And I wanted to believe him. I went downstairs. I climbed up on my bunk bed. I started reading this book. I still remember the book, Jeff. It was a book about squirrels. But I read this book and stayed up late waiting for my parents to get home, and they didn't get home. Well, eventually I fell asleep. The next morning I woke up. I was a little anxious. I climbed off my bunk bed. I went to the door, anxious to see my mom and dad. And when I opened the door, the other side of the family room, kind of this long family room outside my door, I could see my dad was there, but something was different, Jeff. My mom was not there. Instead, there was a friend and a neighbor and another neighbor and another neighbor and a friend. It seemed like half the neighborhood was at our home. And as I walked closer, I could see that my dad had been crying. He had tears on his cheeks. And as I got even closer, my dad was trying to keep the tears back. He wasn't doing a very good job. He was choking them back. And he said words I'll never forget, Jeff. He said, I think our mom is going to leave us. And at this point, I started putting two and two together, and I went into a panic. And I said, Dad, we got to do something. We got to do something. What had happened, Jeff, is my mom had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. The blood vessel in her brain had burst. She was now brain dead. At the hospital, she was being kept alive by a life support system. And I remember being at the hospital a while later, seeing my mom on this hospital bed. She had tubes coming out of her nose. She couldn't breathe on her own. And I was scared. I was seeing my
Yeah.
mom have to have help breathing. Well, it came time for them to unplug the machine. And when they did, I remember my mom kind of crinkled up, Jeff. She turned bluish. I was afraid to give her a kiss because she didn't look like my mom, so I went and faked one. And then I walked out. Well, I got to tell you, as an 8-year-old boy, I watched my mom die. But here's my question for you. How do you think I draw trees now? Well, I draw them the way my mom would want me to, right? And even right now, sharing my story with you, sharing my heart with you and your listeners, figuratively in this moment, I'm drawing trees the way I see them right now.
Yeah.
Little things she did still have a profound effect. And so in some ways, I'm in this really unique situation where I can tell parents how much of an effect they have, even though they don't think they do. I mean, just little things like drawing trees the way you see them, other little things that my mom said or did, knowing things about my mom profoundly affect me. They're affecting her grandkids who she never met. And I suspect they'll affect generations, but that's true of every parent listening here. The little things you do,
Yeah.
all of you parents have a huge effect.
Yeah. Woo! That's a lot, brother. How old are you now?
I'm 47. So
47.
it's been
30,
close to 38 years plus now,
yeah.
38, almost 38 and a half years almost. Um, but even though I haven't given my mom a hug since that day she left, there's things that are almost as good as giving your mom a hug, and it's feeling her influence. And Jeff, I feel her influence all the time. And it's one of the reasons I'm passionate about telling parents that they have more influence than they think. And I'm kind of in a unique spot to be able to tell them that.
Yeah.
And
How how do you so let's you know how does 8-year-old X how do you dad what does that look like? Where does your journey take you as that young boy? Because listen, you know just well as I do. There's someone who's listening to this who knows that 8-year-old kid who's dealing with this right now, or that person, because it happens, right? And
yeah.
there's a story of resilience in there of just that over, just your ability to be able to process life um, as you move forward. Did you have plenty of help? Did you have the network, or did you get to figure it out on your own?
Well, let me tell you this. For me, it was a long journey, Jeff. It was a long journey. I mean, after my mom died, um, I became really, really kind of anxious. I mean, I look back on it now and just realize I had a lot of this kind of abandonment stuff because I would run out in the garage, and my dad was leaving for work, and I'd say, Dad, please don't die. Please don't die. Please don't die. Please put your seatbelt on. I mean, that's not a normal behavior for a 9-year-old to
Yeah,
run out in the garage and say, Dad, don't die. Dad, don't die. And I was always afraid that, somebody close to me was going to die. In fact, I was in the Boy Scouts for a while, and I was afraid to go on these somehow. And I got it in my mind that if I went on these Boy Scout camps, that somebody would die. And so a lot of times I just wouldn't go. I remember one time they finally got me to go, and I kind of jumped out at an intersection and ran home because I didn't want to, I was just afraid, which is kind of that. I didn't realize it at the time. And I don't think my dad, bless his heart, he had 7 kids. He was 34 years old, was a widower with 7 kids. He did his best. He was a good dad, but I don't know if he knew how to help me,
yeah.
and I probably didn't handle it as well as I maybe some of the other kids did who were younger or older. Um, but
All right, so 38 years ago. Give me some math. What year?
86.
86. All right.
1986. Yeah,
So folks, listen, 86 is no internet. I just want to give, so I just want to tell our listeners, excellent. And just want to pause for a second. And I want to,
sure.
when you talk about services, right? Just ability of what we know, how we process all those things. PTSD was not a conversation. Moral injury was not a conversation. Um, you could go, you could go talk to a psychiatrist, but there wasn't any subsidies that came along with that. You may have a little counseling here or there, but you had to figure out a lot of stuff on your own. I'm just giving an idea of what time we read the paper and we watched the news. And if you were lucky to have cable, you had more channels than three or four. So our access to healing and information and networks and people, you were limited to the yellow pages in your area.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And my
you if you had services in your area, then you were good to go, right? But if you live in rural other places like I did, that phone book didn't contain a lot of the information that we may have needed back then.
That's right. That's right. And
Uh,
you got to give people grace and just people did, and I, I'm sure it was hard time. I mean, to be frank with you, Jeff, this took me decades to figure out.
yeah,
It was a long go, and just one more piece of this story. One time I went to this Boy Scout camp thinking someone would die, but I finally decided I'll just go. When I came back, my grandma, my mom's mom, had been killed by a drunk driver, which completely solidified in my head that if I leave, someone's going to die. So I had these kind of like these thoughts that weren't logical, but like they felt really real to me. And, it affected relationships later, kind of this abandonment piece of don't leave, don't leave. And it took some time. I mean, to be truthful, it took some bumps along the road. It took some getting some counseling later on as an adult.
yeah,
And, now I'm happily married most of the time, right? Got a great wife, got uh, 5 beautiful kids, and
oh man.
and anyway.
How long? How long did it take you to find marriage and that solid relationship?
Well, I had a lot of rocky relationships before, and so there were some things that were kind of, and it had a lot to do with. There's more pieces to the puzzle here, but I've now been married for, uh, gosh, we're in our 15th year of marriage now.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So it took,
Yeah,
probably to, probably a long time to get there, frankly.
yeah. And you, that's just that's a lot for an 8-year-old young man that has seven other siblings, right? There's a tension. Um, Man, that is absolutely
And to my dad's credit, I want to honor my dad. My dad did the best he could.
yeah,
I'm sure there's things he may not have done perfectly as a dad, but now that I'm a dad, I can tell you there's a lot of things I don't do that are
yeah.
that I can say I hope my kids give me some grace because we all can do that. But let me tell you something though now. Um, my mom's influence, even though she's not physically here, you know, it, the little things she did, Jeff, and the things I know she knew, and the way she lived her life are now extremely, extremely powerful.
Oh wow.
And there are things that are treasured. There's things that are, um, gosh, this isn't really a good example, but I'll use it anyway. Have you ever seen Star Wars? There's a part where Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader are fighting. And he says something like this. He's like, if you strike me down, I'll become more
Yeah,
powerful than you can possibly
yeah.
imagine. Well, that's not really a great example, but I'll tell you this, for those kids who have lost parents, that parental influence is very, very, very strong. Like it gets, and so and it's strong in the
That's a
right.
great example.
Do you know what I'm
That's
saying?
listen. That's a great example. That's not a horrible example. That's a great example. I tell I'm working on some comic books. I was influenced heavily by comic books, and I try to tell my story through comics. I've been fortunate with ChatGPT. I can really get some things in my or AI in general. I can get some things out, and I was like, I just put my feelings and things, and I'm like storyboard this into a superhero. And so I've been working on some storyboarding to help that young man that like I was, and like obviously like you were in your situation, help them just kind of process. So yeah, great example because that relates. When you say that to me, I know exactly that because I know that moment and I know what that feels like as an adult now.
Yeah.
Um,
So, I'm on a mission to try to help parents. I want parents to know that they have the best job in the world. Here's the thing, Jeff. Let me just tell you this. I'll ask people sometimes. I'll ask people if they know what their great great grandparents did for a living. I'll
yeah,
say, well, do you know what your great great grandfather, your great great grandmother did? Now remember, that's two greats above grandpa. So it's basically your grandfather and grandmother's grandpa. And I'll tell you, most people can't tell you. Now,
yeah,
some people can tell you what one or two of them did, but remember, you've got 16 of them. Okay. Do they know what all 16 did? Most people can't tell you. And here's the truth, Jeff. Most people, our great great grandchildren, for parents, are not going to care what we did for work. They're not going to care. Like, do you care if your great great grandfather had the coolest horse or if
yeah.
he had
That's
the
right.
coolest plow? I mean, are you really caring about did he live in the good part of town and did he have a great job? I mean, nobody cares. But the kind of parent that your great great grandfather was, your great great grandmother, they're still affecting you in ways that you don't even think about. Like, let me just give you one example. I live in the United States of America. Well, why? Well, it's because of a choice that one of my great 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 grandparents made. Several, more than one of them. And they decided as a family to move from Europe to America. Well, that's a family decision they made decades or hundreds of years ago, some of them. And now I'm here. Well, that decision they made affects the language I speak, the fact that I'm speaking English to you. It affects my religion. It affects my educational opportunities. It affects my economic opportunities. All kinds of things are affected because of a decision that someone made hundreds of years ago, and it's affecting me profoundly today. Now, that's an obvious one because it's geographic. It's like, okay, they got on a boat and they went across the ocean and came here. But less obvious, but still just as real, is were they checked in? Were they checked out? Were they kind and patient? Were they impatient? Or, were they, what kind of parents were they? And that feeling can still permeate down through generations. But what they did for a living, the truth is this, Jeff, what you and I do for a living can do a lot of good in the world. Don't get me wrong. Doing podcasts and helping people, doing a lot of good things, that can all help. But the truth is most of what we do is not going to last as far as what we do as parents. And so what I'm trying to do is to talk to dads and say, you know what, dads, you've got this huge opportunity. You got an opportunity to shape generations hundreds of years from now. You got an opportunity to make a huge difference in the world. And a lot of dads are not thinking like that. They're thinking, well, if I go out and conquer the world, or if I go out and make millions of dollars, if I go start this company or do something. But here's the real truth. Most companies die by year 18, even big ones. I mean, most of them aren't. The statistics say by year 18, you and I could build a big company together, Jeff, and a decade or two from now, it could be bought, sold, bankrupted, disrupted, not relevant anymore, But the kind of parents we are, man, we have an opportunity. And even if you've blown it in the past, you might say, well, gosh, my kids are grown, or like you still have an opportunity. You're still a dad. You have an opportunity to shape and help generations that you'll never see. And I can tell you that right now from my mom. My mom, Jeff,
Yeah,
her influence has a positive influence on my kids. I can see it. Has a positive influence on my brother and his children. He was 7 weeks old when my mom died. He was still breastfeeding, her influence, even though she only lived 32 years, is still happening. And one of the reasons I'm passionate about dads, and I'll be quiet here in just a second, but one of the reasons I'm passionate about dads,
good.
I talked to a policeman a while ago, and the policeman said, he said, 90 something percent, I can't remember, it was over 90% of the people he takes to jail and prison didn't have a good dad in their life. For some
Yeah,
reason, for whatever reason, we could talk about why. But kids, when they have a dad in their life, they're less likely to go down that road. Now, if you didn't have a dad in your life, does that mean you're destined to go down that road? No, absolutely not. It doesn't mean that at all. But it just means, gosh, you can. That's one area where, gosh, if people have dads, it's easier for them to make choices that are good if the dad's checked in and a good dad, and they're trying to help and love their children.
You're spot on, man. Yeah, I didn't never meet my dad. I think he's still around, but I've never met him. And I teach my kids that we're playing the long game, and I wear it when I speak. I got a shirt that I wear, and I got some stickers that I hand out that's breaking curses, break the curse. And that's what it's about. It's about breaking those, just because I had a crappy, situation, my dad wasn't around, doesn't give me permission to do the same thing. Um,
I love
and
that,
when my
Jeff.
son,
I love that,
yeah,
Jeff. Yeah.
my son, when he got a little older, he's 15 now, so we talk way more about my life because they can understand it. That's kind of why I got into this. I needed my kids to be old enough to process because I didn't want that negative influence. I needed them to see that I was using this as a positive. And I
Yeah.
tell them all the time, right? I want to help just like you. I want to be able to convey that message that just because it was bad for you doesn't give you that permission, and you can change it. And just what you said, and I tell them that. And to take it a step further, when you got into the grandparents thing, is I'm working with my mom, where I didn't know my dad, but I'm working with my mom on storyboarding. I want to podcast it, just video it, and just keep it. And then they'll have it. And then that way they can understand of all the hell my mom went through, a little bit of my story to where they are. And then their kids will know and all those things because I tell them what I went through, what my mom went through is done. You guys will never let our family go back into that ever again. And it takes me to where and everything you talked about is legacy. And that's what you talk about in your book. What I want my children to know before I die. You focus on legacy parents, or the legacy that parents leave for children. I was going to ask you about that. Like, what are some of the most critical lessons you believe parents should prioritize to maximize their influence?
Well, it's a super good question, Jeff. And let me tell you just an idea. People will spend so much time trying to get a good career. They'll go to school for years. They'll go get a master's degree, or they'll go to college, or they'll go to a trade school. They'll do something so they can learn to make money for their family, which is noble, which is great, because as one of the jobs as dads is to do our best to provide for our families. But sometimes I wonder if we put as much effort into learning how to influence our children for good. Let me give you one example. One of the things that changed my life was when I read a book by Glenn Latham. It was called The Power of Positive Parenting by Glenn Latham. And in this book, he talks about how behaviors are like seeds and attention is basically like water. Okay. So, like, we water the behaviors we want to see grow with attention. Well, a lot of parents, you see a parent, the kid walks in and the parent goes, "I can't believe you stayed out till 3 a.m. last night and you didn't make your bed and you're getting a C- in math and blah, blah, blah." Well, what is that parent doing? That parent's actually watering the behaviors they don't want to see grow with attention. Do you see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
reading this book actually changed me, that changed the way I parent. And I got to tell you this. So, like, if you want to build a behavior in your children, let me give you one example from this book. There was a kid who was getting sent to the principal's office all the time. And it became such a big deal that the counselor came in. They wanted to figure out what was going on with this kid. Well, the counselor watched what was happening in the classroom, and she noticed that this kid, this troublemaking kid, was doing a lot of things right. He was listening, he was obeying instructions, he was doing what he needed to do, but the teacher was given zero attention for that. Well, as soon as the kid would do something wrong, the teacher would go, "Oh, there you go again," and write his name on the board. And then he'd do something else wrong and he'd get a check mark, and he'd do something else wrong and he'd get another check mark. Soon he had enough to get marched down to the principal's office. Well, the counselor followed along. And what happened is when he got there, the lady at the front desk at the principal's office put him, she said, "Oh, I know you'd be here again." And she sits him right next to the window. So they found out he was actually being double reinforced. So he's getting a lot of attention for doing what's wrong. And then when he gets to the principal's office, they put him next to this window and the bell rings and all his friends are coming by waving to him. So he's going, hey, he was kind of the cool bad kid, because he's at the principal's office again. And this idea of like being a dad, like how do I influence my kids for good? When I read this book, I'm like, wow, I wonder if I'm doing that. And I found that I was actually giving attention to all kinds of behaviors that I didn't want. And so after this, when I learned about this, my daughter once, she got up, she's like 6 or 7 years old. She knocks on my door one morning and she goes, hey, Dad, I've got a surprise. I opened the door. She goes, surprise. I got ready. I got a surprise. I made my lunch. I made my bed. I got ready for school. And you didn't even have to ask me. And I just learned this principle a little while ago. And I went to my wife and I said, you know what? Let's give this a lot of attention. And she goes, let's try it. Let's see if it works. So I went there. I gave it a lot of attention. I'm like, hey, your bed looks great. You made your lunch. We didn't even have to ask you. You got dressed for school. That's awesome. And my wife laid it on pretty thick too, Jeff. And I got to tell you, my daughter did it again, right? She kept doing it. We kept giving it attention kind of intermittently. But that one part, I sometimes feel just that learning that one, I read that book. It took me a little while, but that one principle for me was really helpful. Now, there are some dads who do that perfectly. And there's some dads who think, man, if I just point out everything they do wrong, maybe they'll change. And actually the research shows that that's probably not going to help. I mean, very, very less effective than the most powerful way, Jeff, to shape human behavior is to catch people doing something right. So as dads, if we can key in, what are our kids doing right? It doesn't mean we can't have a conversation and say, hey, we need to work on this. It doesn't mean we can't point out sometimes the negative, but what we really need to do is give attention to the things that kids are doing right. And that was for me personally, learning that changed the way I parented. Well, I'm sure there's some things I could still learn about being a good dad. I know it, but could I put as much effort into being a good dad, knowing that influence is going to go on for generations, for centuries, forever, really, as I put into, say, trying to make money today. And I guess what I'm saying is, dads, if we can put a little more effort in just learning to be a good dad. Yeah. So I put some of that in my book. I actually even created a course called Dadfluence. Cool. That is trying to help dads. So
they don't, and you and I are, there's no manual. I tell my kids that all the time. I'm like, listen, I just want y'all to know. Maybe I said, how many times have y'all got to be a kid? And they were like, well, we don't know that. I'm like, or I don't know. Why are you asking me this? And I go, well, guess what? This is my first time being a parent. And I'm learning and I'm trying to learn you all. And all I want you to do is I have a set of ditch lines that's not going to get us killed. And that's all my job is. But I tell them all the time how much they teach me. And just what that looks like from my side of, hey, we're trying to figure this out together. I don't want to dampen their emotions. I don't want to dampen their feelings. And, but also say, hey, you're not going to you're not going to leave here with your butt hanging out of your dress, right? So you're not going to wear that top, or you're not, your honor, you're looking after your mother. So that's, just the typical dad stuff. But when it comes to those, and we do a lot of sports and athletics, and how I try, like we're playing the long game. So what you lost, we got reps in, and that's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to get a little further, and just keep playing, just reps. That's all we're. Someone said last night, like they were talking to me at girls basketball, like our team does a lot of presses, and he was like, seems like it's crazy to be doing full court presses at this age group. And I go, yeah, they're getting them ready for high school ball, right? We have to play. So just like that mentoring, man, my kids teach me so much every day, right? They teach me so much. And then, I'm like, I try to do what you do. I try not to go back to my childhood and bring those folks that I was around. I try not to bring those in. I had good people around me, but that situation that I was in, it's not allowed in this house.
Right. The situation
awesome.
don't allow in. Right. And and I love how you're mentoring. I love how you're trying to do things. It's like, hey, are you doing full court press? Where you're like, yeah, they can handle it. I love that attitude, Jeff. I think that's a great thing you're doing. It reminds me, My 5-year-old daughter came to me once and she goes, "Hey, Dad, I want to hike this mountain." There's a mountain by our house that's about 11,700 feet tall.
Yeah.
And she's 5 years old and she goes to me, "I want to hike this mountain." And, I could just say, "Nah, you're too young." But she really wanted to. And I said, "Well, if you really want to, I mean, we can give it a shot. I got to tell you, it's 15 miles and we're going up thousands and thousands of feet. We're going to have to hike from the like early morning till probably all day. What are you going to do when your feet start hurting?" She goes, "Well, I'll probably take a rest and go." And I said, "Are you sure you want to go?" She wanted to go. And I said, "You know what? I'm going to give it a shot." Now she's 5 years old. And I
Yeah.
got to tell you, Jeff, she made it to the top of this mountain. She surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, you would be surprised. When she got to the top, there were people who were giving her a standing ovation because this little 5-year-old's at the top of this 11,700-foot mountain. But she had confidence because of it. And I think like what you were talking about, like doing the full court press where you're like, let your kids do hard things. That's one of the
Yeah.
things that dads can do is help their kids build confidence. It's like, let me give you an example. How a dad reacts is going to be the voice that the kid hears in their head. So that's good news and bad news. Let me tell you what I mean. So if a kid falls down and skins their knee, let's just say, and the parents go, "Oh my goodness, you skinned your knee, and we got to
Yeah.
get it back. We got to go," and they get coochie coochie coo, and they get really intense. The unspoken message to the kid is, "You're fragile, right? Like you're
Yeah.
breakable." But if the dad or the mom says something like, "Looks like you skinned your knee. That happens. I've skinned my knee. It's going to hurt for a while, but you're going to be okay." Then when they skin their knee later and you're not there, they hear that voice of, "Hey, my dad was confident and he told me it was going to be okay. I'm going to be okay." Now, obviously, if they break their leg, of course you're going to get them you're going to get them medical attention if it's something serious. But I'm saying the way we react. So when my daughter came to me, I could have said, "No, you can't do that. You're too young." But
Right.
if by saying, "You know what I really said was, hey, maybe you are strong enough and I'm going to believe in the strong part of you rather than believe in the weak part of you. You said you want to do it and you're 5 years old and you keep pushing me to do it. Let's give it a shot." And then when she did do it, she came back and she had this beaming, like, "I hiked this mountain," and she was confident, and she's very confident now. And I think that as dads, we have the ability to shape our kids and help them be confident because they hear the confidence we have in them.
Yeah.
And so if I have this attitude that, "Hey, you're going to be fine. You can do this. You can do full court press like you were talking about. You fell down, you get back up and you'll be fine." Like they're going to hear that voice later when I'm not there. And that's what I'm trying to do is play the long game, like you said, and like build confidence in them now, let them do hard things now and express faith in their growing. They want to be like me. Yeah, they're young, but they want to be like powerful, good people. And I'm going to see the strength in them. So thank you.
I The other thing, that's great stuff, man. Like you can't say that loud enough. Um, the other thing I think that folks have got to get comfortable with is if you make it's just like in business. We'll get to that. I want to ask you a couple things before we wrap up on your business stuff. But um, if you've said something, I like I can't remember the last time, but my kid, I tell him like, hold me accountable. Don't let me slide. If I say something that
Mm.
is that you don't agree with, call me out. And they had done something or whatever, and they come back. They were like, well, you made a big deal out of it. I said, well, hold on here. Let me hear your side. Have the ability to say, you know what, I was wrong. You know what?
Oh
You
yeah.
guys are
Yeah,
absolutely
absolutely.
right. I reacted based off of some old negative, some old influences, some things. Um,
Sorry. Yeah.
it's dumb stuff, right? But just don't root in and be like I'm dead and my decision's final, this that, and the other. They came back to me. They were. I was like, I said my piece and spoke my mind, and then I went back and I was like, well, hang on, and they were like, so they started kind of calling me out on my crap, and
Yeah.
so I was like, all right, tell me, I want to hear what you got to say, and they told me, and I was like, you know what, I'm wrong. You guys are absolutely right. My mind was thinking in one direction, and you guys have helped me see a whole nother side that I didn't get to see. That's communication. That's us
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
together to move beyond those curses, right?
Yeah.
So powerful, dude. You do such a great job the way you put it
Oh,
out there too.
well, and the thing is, I've made plenty of mistakes, Jeff. I make mistakes all the time, and I have to do exactly what you're saying, which is like, "Gosh, guys, I blew it, and I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And being able to admit your error is the first step to being able to change it, right? So if you go around saying it's not my problem, everything's everybody else's problem, a lot of people want to say, well, it's her fault, or it's my spouse's fault, or it's my kid's
Yeah.
fault. But the truth is, until we say, you know what, I could change my approach, it doesn't mean that everything's totally your fault. But the part that is your fault, you need to acknowledge. Do you get what I'm saying? So if you say, hey, I wasn't as patient, gosh, I felt myself getting heated and I reacted poorly, I need to apologize. I didn't handle that well at all, and being able to admit it and say, you know what, I'm sorry. I made a mistake and I need to make it better. Will you please forgive me? That's a super mature thing to do. And that actually helps them because they see, oh, dad can do that. So maybe I can do that in my own marriage later because I saw my dad apologize to me or to my wife or to whoever it was. You know what I'm saying? And try to make
Yeah,
things
absolutely.
better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, dude, that's they gotta hear that. Mine was, I thought you just argued. I didn't realize that folks got along. I thought every Friday you argued till Sunday and you went back to work on Monday, right? So I don't I had to understand that. You jumped over into business. I don't want to get through this. I think you and I are EksAyn. I think we're two people that could probably do many hours on our fatherhood and dad and parenting and all
Oh
those
yeah,
things and
sure.
stories. But you've got success in business throughout all this stuff that you put yourself through, that you went through and that you put yourself through, because there's a little bit of that comes into this. Sometimes when you're healing, is you keep yourself into some of those hard moments. Um, Record-breaking sales. What lessons from your personal journey, especially those challenges that we talked about early in your life, how did that translate into your approach to influence your business and negotiations and things that you do inside of your business world?
Well, let me just tell you this. First of all, I want to tell you that it hasn't always been, and it still can go up and down as an entrepreneur or somebody who does sales. Sometimes things are really, really good, and sometimes things aren't good at all, and that can happen currently in the same year, the same month, even. And so I will say this: the same principles that apply to being a good dad or in business even go both ways. In other words, let me give you an example. We talked a little bit about how catching your children doing something right is a huge way to affect people. Well, I've used that same principle. Let me give you an example. I was sitting in New York. This guy looks at me and he goes, "You're the only salesperson I've ever let into my office." And I won't tell you quite yet what he said, but I want people to think, what did I do to get into this high level director in New York? Well, it was the same exact principle that I talked about, which was catching people doing something right. So like, my daughter comes in and says, "Hey dad, surprise." And I'm like, wow. In the past, I might have just ignored it, kind of brushed it off like, "That's nice, honey." But I thought, wait, if I really want to shape behavior, I got to catch her doing something right. And so I tried at that point to do it right, which is like, give her attention. Well, I'd called I'd emailed this director in New York and he totally ignored me. And any of your people who are doing sales know that they get ignored a lot.
Yeah.
Totally ignored me. I called back in. His secretary answers the phone and I said, "Hey, can I speak to?" We'll call him Bob. I speak to Bob, and his secretary says he's unavailable. And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, maybe what I could do is just resend the email that I sent, a week ago or so, several days ago, and copy it to you. Would that be okay?" And she goes, "Sure." And we started talking just for a little bit. And I noticed that she was just this really, really bubbly, happy. You could almost hear her smiling, even though I couldn't see her. And I just said to her, I said, "I'm on the phone all day long. And I just really appreciate you being so friendly and courteous. It's refreshing. I mean, I talk to people all day long. Thank you." And she goes, "Thanks," in her kind of nice way. And then while she was there, I said, "You know what? I'm going to mention that to your boss." And I pulled up the email I'd sent, a week or several days ago. And she was still on the phone with me right there. And I typed really fast. I said, "Hey, dear Bob, I spoke to Janice. She's very professional and helpful. I think she does, she's an asset to your team." And so here was a sincere compliment about something she did, which was just being friendly and courteous and, just refreshing. I sent the email to her boss and I copied her on it. And I said, "Hey, I just resent that email. Did it come through okay?" And she goes, "Let me check." And she goes, She goes, yeah, I came through. And she goes, and then she paused a little more and she goes, hey, thanks for the compliment. And I said, I meant it. It was sincere. Thanks for being so awesome. That was the end of the conversation. Well, fast
Yeah.
forward back to where I'm sitting in New York across this high level director. And this guy looks at me and he goes, you're the only salesperson I've blended in my office. This is what he said next. He goes, the reason you're here is because you were nice to my secretary. He goes, I talk to my
Yep.
secretary more than I talk to my wife. Some of these sales guys don't understand that. Well, Jeff, that principle is the exact same principle as when my daughter knocks on the door and says, surprise, Dad, I got ready for giving attention. So the next time you want to influence your kids, just like that kid who was getting sent to the principal's office all the time, remember, they're probably doing a lot of stuff right. Let's catch them doing something right. Positive reinforcement, which is really just the golden rule. Let's just be honest, treating people like we want to be treated. I mean, who doesn't want to be noticed for the stuff that they do that's good? I mean, if we just treat people like we want to be treated in business and at home, which is hard to do. I mean, sometimes we're tired and we're cranky and we blow it. Say you're sorry and move on and do the best you can. You know, we don't have your kids knowing that you love them in the long run can make up for some of the mistakes we've all made. And I've made plenty. I mean, we all make mistakes, but let's just do our best and try to do it the way we can. But it's the same principles, the principles that can make you successful at home, the same principles that make you successful in business. But what we've got to do is not make business more important than home. A lot of people, they'll do all these things to make the corporate world, and they'll go to meetings and they'll learn, but then they neglect their home life. And I'm like, yeah, your business is going to be dead in a decade or two, but your family life is going to go on for generations. Like, why are we neglecting the most important thing we can do?
That made that secretary's day. I follow some similar stuff. I tell you, a cool one that had happened to me one time. I worked in an industry where a 1-star review would come pretty quick if just it seemed like it could be a little negative and I got a call and the secretary was like, our admin, she's like, you need to talk to guy on line one. He's just being, I'm like, all right. So I pick it up and he's like, hey, what's going on, man? And I was like, not much. I'm waiting to get my butt chewed, right? And he's like, hey, I own a company and I have staff. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, go check on that girl up front. She's having a bad day. And and uh and he started laughing and I was like, you being for real? And he's like, he goes, I could easily hand you your butt, but that's not gonna make a situation better. And when he did that for me, man, I do that all the time now. Like I will stop if someone just like chops me off or they're being whatever, I'll be like, I'll sneak, I'll figure out who their lead is or whatever, and I'll either call or send a note or whatever. It's like, hey, check on your team members having a bad day. And because we do, we all have bad days. And she just, and when it was legitimate, like she came in and it was a blow up at home that it came into work and the computer wouldn't power up and the freaking phone cord was tangled and all the things. And she was just frustrated and he happened to get the brunt of that. It's taught me that 30, 45-second interaction changed me forever. And I do the same thing. Such a good thing. I don't want to steal no more much more of your time here, but man, this has been a good one. Tell us all about that new book, your Hidden Forces book that you got coming out.
Well, the thought is that, you know, people think that influence is always at the top, right? And so people sometimes say, I'm going to try to get to this. But the truth is that's not been my experience at all. If you look at some of the greatest people who have ever lived, like think about this, the person who got me into this high level director in New York was what some people would consider a low level secretary. She's the one who had the key to the gate. She's the one who got me in. Yep. It wasn't the CEO's buddy. It wasn't the golf course, the senator or the congressman. It was the secretary. And the problem that we have and we see in a lot of the world is people, they have this scale. They'll treat some people who they think are important with a lot of respect. But then the guy at the end of the freeway ramp who needs food, they'll just drive by him. You know, you'd be surprised. The people who you think don't have influence sometimes have way, way, way more influence than you could possibly imagine. I'll give you one example. Maybe, Gandhi. You've heard of Gandhi. Yeah. This is an old one. Gandhi was a man, he made his own clothes out of homespun. I mean, he lived very, very frugally. When he died, he had 2 million people at his funeral because he literally had liberated India from the British rule, right? He had way more clout than any of the hotshots at the day. Okay. Here's another prime example. Okay. And I'll just bring this one up. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was a poor carpenter. He was homeless much of the time. You know, do we celebrate Herod's? Who were the hotshots during Jesus Christ's time? Pilate, Herod, maybe Caiaphas, a high priest. Do we celebrate their birthday in December? No, we don't. We celebrate Jesus
No.
Christ. Here's the thing. It's the same pattern that exists here. The most powerful people in the world, Jeff, to be frank with you, are parents.
Yeah.
People don't realize that their ability to shape the entire next generation is in the hands of moms and dads. It's not in the politicians. Some people say, you know, if we just have this politician or this political party or that political party or this social program or lack of social programs, whatever it is. And by the way, I'm not saying anything bad about politicians. Politicians can do some good in the world. But the truth is, what we really need, Jeff, are good dads like yourself.
Yeah.
Good dads, good moms to step up and say, you know what, I'm going to be there for my children. I'm going to change. That's what's going to change things. It's not going to be at the top levels of society where some directive from some president or world leader comes down. It's really going to happen in the homes of parents. And that's why I think the world is upside down. Influence is found where you least expect it. The secretary got me in. It wasn't the buddy. I could tell you 100 examples of that, and I give those in my book. I mean, in the book that's coming out, there will be more than one example. So I'll tell you, maybe not hundreds, but a lot. So,
That's you're spot on, dude. I'm 50 this year. I have to date myself because if you see the video, I'm all grayed up here. But I'm 50 this year, and what I could say is I've lived through multiple presidents. I've lived through multiple governors of our state, councils, you know, all those things. And no policy, my life has continued on regardless of who was in charge. My family's life, whether it was a Democrat or Republican, whatever, my family's life has continued to move on. Money has flowed into our household, and we have done, went, all the things, got, did, lived, experienced, helped, whatever you want to add into there, regardless of who was in those seats. And the most time that I spent, the best time that I feel like I've spent developing is me and my family and my kids and my relationship with my wife. And
that's right.
let me ask you,
You're a
you know,
good
and I
man,
want to,
Jeff.
and this is,
I just got to tell you that you're a good man. I just felt like I need to say that.
I appreciate it, man. I don't think we tell good men that enough either. So I used to have a hard time taking compliments, but now I really appreciate you that, and I mean it, right? Um, But here's what I'll tell everybody else: stop, go back to the beginning, and start over. Because not everybody is in that mindset. And parents struggle and because they don't know and they've had negative influences and they're trying to figure out their own thing or they're stuck in their way or their mindset or that negative or whatever. You know them. Listeners, you know who they are. And you know someone that's like, and you have to softly tee this up maybe, but you know someone who's struggling as a parent that could use just this positive message that we're trying to give today. Um, and then I wanted to take it a step further. How can folks, as we're wrapping up here, how can folks connect with you and learn more about you and consume your books and all that stuff? Where would you like for people to land?
Well, let me tell you this, Jeff, and I haven't done this before, but I had a thought just as we were talking that I'm going to do it, and I may do it in the future. But right now, if anybody wants, um, if you Google my name, my first name, which is spelled EksAyn, and then you spell the word Dadfluence, Dadfluence, you'll find a course on Teachable called Dadfluence that I just came out with in the last several months, and it I normally charge about $77, $78 for it, around that. I if your audience puts in the code word family, FAMLLY. They'll just get it for free. They can get the
Yeah.
entire 7-week course. It's got a bunch of things, and I'll leave that up there for probably at least a couple months, so that so any one of your listeners wants to, they can get that for free. And that's my best parenting stuff that I know of. You could also connect with me at myfirstname.com, EksAyn.com, or eksinfluence.com is my business, more of a business website. But I'd encourage anyone, moms or dads, if they know somebody, a dad who could use it, give it to them for the holidays, Christmas, whatever. I mean, I'd want to just give that as a gift for free to anybody who's listening. I'm not going to
Yeah.
spam
So,
just as something that you can
yeah.
have.
Thank you. It means a ton. That absolutely means a lot. I can't thank you enough for getting that out. Man, that's so cool. Um, like many of my conversations, an hour or so is not enough. And at some point in time, if your new book comes out, I hope you and I reconnect because I would
Oh, I'd
love
love
for
to.
us
What an
just to
honor.
go. Yeah, I'd love to keep
Yeah.
going down the rabbit hole of things and just learn more about you. But as far as today, and man, your story is absolutely moving, and I can't thank you enough for being with us and sharing this with me and letting me get to know you um, on my platform. So I thank you so much for being here.
Jeff, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. You're a great host. You're doing great things in the world. I'm honored to be on your show. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share on your platform here today, Jeff.
All right, thank you. Make sure you guys connect with him, EksAyn Anderson, on Second Chance Podcast.